to the Handsell. I'm Ron Hogan, and my guest today is Grace Loyd. She is the author of The Affairs of Others from Picador. It's set here in Brooklyn, actually quite close to Greenlight Bookstore where we are now in Fort Greene. Prior to writing this, you've been the fiction editor at Playboy magazine.
That's true.
And I would imagine that with the kinds of authors that you've worked with there over the years, that must almost in its own way be essentially kind of like a master class in writing.
Absolutely. I mean, I worked there. I worked at the New York Review of Books on the Classic series, and I worked at the New Yorker, but my longest professional experience was at Playboy, and it really was a master class, I'd say, because I had the considerations of literary work and then the considerations of having a pretty mainstream audience, or at least picking work that could satisfy some of the things that my writers and I were interested in, but also could convert people to the cause of reading and of literature. So it was, what is it doing with language? What is it doing with pace? What is it doing with plot? And then seeing, okay, it fits. I'm going to be able to buy it. I bought it. And then working with them and really focusing on what each story, what the intentions of that story is. Because every writer writes something hoping for a different effect or a different result or a different experience. I think I got very good at channeling them and their intentions and worrying about whether they fulfilled those intentions plot-wise, language-wise. So yeah, it was pretty wonderful, and I didn't tell my writers that I write. I kind of kept that a secret because I wanted it to be pretty pure, and it was a wonderful journey. I don't know if people were noticing through all the other content what we were putting in there, but we put some really marvelous fiction in there. Not erotic fiction, which I have to correct people about often, but really compelling work. And Dennis Johnson, Margaret Atwood, James Elroy, Michelle Houellebecq, thrillingly diverse, and all hopefully engaging to both a literary reader and maybe someone who's thinking of becoming a literary reader, or just a reader, period.
So the way that the Handsell works is that readers like you send me lists of books that they've enjoyed, and then I come to bookstores with authors like Amy or booksellers, and we go over those lists and we take a look at those books and then come up with books that we think you might enjoy reading next. I have a list today that includes 3 books, and they are Robin Sloan's Mr. Penumbra's 24-Hour Bookstore, For the Relief of Unbearable Urges by Nathan Englander, and Kristopher Jansma's The Unchangeable Spots of Leopards, which was one of the first books that was actually featured on the Handsell here at Greenlight a few months back. I know that there are some books that I looked at that popped into my head when I saw this list, and I hear that there's a couple of books that you came up with as well.
Yeah, I came up with too many. You told me I have to limit myself, so I will try. It seems like these books have whimsy. They have an invitation to wonder. They can be very particular, but they can also be quite epic in their reach. There's a wonderful piece of music, the Impromptus by Schubert, that kind of gets very dark and then light and resolves itself into tranquility. So I thought of that marvelous piece of music. But I thought of Italo Calvino's The Baron of the Trees, which is so remarkable and about a young aristocrat who would rather live in the trees and among the trees and view life from the trees as a form of difference and a form of accessing wonder. The choice is both sort of beautiful and, as we come to find out, a little bit tragic. And I think these books have all of those elements in there. I also thought of G. Willow Wilson's really fascinating, really kind of everything but the kitchen sink, Alif the Unseen.
Oh, I love Alif.
Don't you love it? Mm-hmm. I do too, and I love the way her mind works, and she's combining something very old with something new, this hacker society and, far off, unnamed, land. With the supernatural, the very old world, and doing it all quite seamlessly and in smart and unexpected ways. So those are 2. And then, if you will indulge me, I also thought of Lives of a Cell, Lewis Thomas, again, this invitation to wonder about how the interconnectedness of all creatures, how, for instance, our own mitochondria has different DNA than we do, even though it's housed inside us. So it changes this whole sense of we're one creature. We're not. As you and I are sitting here, we're millions of creatures. And he talks about different species. He talks about computers and music and the interconnectedness of it all. Again, like these books, an invitation to wonder and to think both in specific ways and in very broad ways.
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting nonfiction. There's not a lot of cases where we get like a fiction list and then somebody says, "Oh, here, read this nonfiction."
Right,
And I think in this case that's a really interesting leap. Well, the book that I came up with was one that came out actually right around the same time as Mr. Penumbra's 24-hour bookstore, and it stuck in my head because it's also by a San Francisco writer like Robin Sloan. His name is Scott Hutchins, and the book is called A Working Theory of Love. And I think it will appeal to, the interest that somebody who reads Sloan and Jansma and Englander has in voice. And the subject matter is very cool too. It's about a man who's working for a computer company, and they're trying to develop an artificial intelligence. And the sort of like the baseline they're using are the diaries of his dead father. And they're trying to turn it into essentially like a chat bot and loading it up with that information. And gradually, the more time that he spends talking with this computer simulation of his father, the more realistic it starts to become.
A real embodied ghost.
In its embodied ghostness.
Yeah.
And so there's that, and of course there's the contemporary relationship problems that he's going through. And I think just the sort of sense of the not eeriness in a horror sort of way, but eeriness in a sort of sense that it's like there's something strange or just slightly off about the world, the way that this guy is making his way through the world and wanting to set things right. And I think, certainly with the affairs of others, that's another great example of the way that our pasts, our emotional pasts, are sort of haunting us as we're trying to make our way through it.
One of the things I liked about writing The Affairs of Others, I have this eccentric, misanthropic narrator, is that she is haunted and wants to be, and she is not apologetic for it. I mean, everyone's saying you can't live in the past, move forward, reinvent. And Celia, the narrator, is defiant. She won't do that. She refuses. And that rebellion appealed to me. And we all try to live in the present, and if we're practicing Buddhists, for example, maybe we're better than I am. but we are very informed by the past, even as we're moving, it seems to me, at breakneck speed. As this book captures quite well, the Hutchins book, into the future. The Hutchins book, I think, has lots in common with Richard Powers' work as well,
yes.
and stuff that they're thinking about. And he does that so well. He wrote a beautiful story called Dark Was the Night, which forgive me, published in Playboy. But it's the same feeling that we're moving toward, we are this amazing ability to reach and touch so much, and yet our emotional selves and how that TikToks is really about the past and relationship with our husbands, our lovers, our parents. That's where we live a lot of the time, even as we're moving toward the future.
And I think, there's an obvious similarity in A Working Theory of Love to an older Richard Powers book, Galatea 2.0.
Oh, of course, right.
But, I would also encourage readers to check out some of Powers' most recent books, such as The Echo Maker or Generosity. Which are both really wonderful books.
Yes.
And I think, like, with the common ground that he shares with Hutchins is that he is someone who, it's not quite science fiction, but it's fiction that takes science seriously.
Absolutely.
And uses it as another way of looking at how we make our way through the world. Well, that is a really cool nucleus of reading for you to engage in, and I hope that some of you will check out some or all of those books. I have been talking with Amy Grace Loyd. Her book is The Affairs of Others. Go look for it at a bookstore like Greenlight Bookstore here in Fort Greene, Brooklyn.
Great bookstore.
And I'm Ron Hogan, and this has been the Handsell. Thank you so much for watching.
Thank you.